From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., Cole on Congress. The program discussing national issues that affect Oklahoma. Your host, U.S. Representative Tom Cole.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Cole on Congress. Today I'm pleased to welcome Congressman Adam Kinzinger as our special guest. Adam's newly elected representative from the 11th District of Illinois. He's been named to the Energy and Commerce Committee and served on the Majority Transition Committee. Adam also serves as a pilot in the United States Air Force Reserves and has earned the Air Medal 6 times, serving in Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. Adam, it's really great to have you here.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
And I can say that in multiple ways. Believe me, you and your class, we're excited by, and thank you for putting us back in the majority again.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I usually try and start out with something a little bit personal. I had the opportunity to get to know you a little bit during the course of your campaign when you were up here looking for support, and boy, you took back a seat, beat a sitting incumbent in Barack Obama's home state. Not an easy thing to do. And I remember the first time I met you, a couple guys that said, I really believe this guy can win, and I was somewhat skeptical, and then I heard about your background. I mean, obviously your wonderful service to our country, but not to embarrass you too much, but obviously a rather heroic incident in your own right, literally saving a young woman's life under attack. Tell us just a little bit about that, and just your background in general. What got you to run for Congress?
Yeah, you know, I went into the military when I was, back in 2001 is when I actually joined after 9/11, and I had just made the decision, look, I enjoy what I'm doing. I was on the county board at the time, was a young guy on the county board working, after college, but I remember thinking, the fight's on the outside. We got to fight to protect our country. And that's basically the same reason that I got involved in Congress. I remember literally flying one day and I was talking to my co-pilot, and it was like one of those kids nowadays discussions, we're spending too much, people are out of work, and I remember thinking, if I'm willing to fight for my country on the outside, I have to be willing to fight for it on the inside. And my district is a district that's basically been Republican for a long time. We lost it in 2008. And, I had a representative that I didn't think was following the will of the folks in my district. So that's when I decided to run. But the situation that you're talking about happened in Milwaukee. It was back in 2006. And I had just done a mission to the border of Mexico with the Air National Guard. And came back home, and that night, my girlfriend at the time, myself, and my best friend were out and had dinner. Well, I remember it was just after midnight. I'm walking back, and I heard a woman screaming, and she's running over at me and holding her throat, and there was blood, a lot of blood, and basically her boyfriend had thrown her down and was had slit her throat twice. Jeez. Actually. She ended up getting 110 stitches. I ended up having to wrestle this guy with a knife who was a lot bigger than me, and but you know what? It was one of those days that you can say, the Lord orchestrated my response on that, because it's something that, normally I don't think it would be as easy to do, but he was able to really just say, do the right thing. And I really thought I was going to die in that. I mean, I really had made the decision in my life that this is probably the end of it, but you know what? I'd rather go down doing something right than have to live with the memory every day.
Well, I tell you, it says a lot about your character.
Well, thanks.
And, thank you. And tell us a little bit, too, about your service. I mean, you gave us the circumstances under which you went in, but you didn't exactly just sit back here in the States. You were actually out in very dangerous areas doing important missions. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually signed on the dotted line October of 01, so literally October 11th, so 1 month after 9/11. And but it was the fall of 03 when I finally went to officer training and then to pilot training. So I'm a pilot right now. I'm still in the Air National Guard, still get to fly, even as a congressman now. But I used to fly a KC-135, which is the big mid-air refueler. In fact, Tinker Air Force Base has a lot of them in that area, of course.
Indeed.
And
down at Altus.
That's right. And so and in Altus, and that's where I trained at, actually. I spent a year and a half in Oklahoma.
It used to be in my district. Little luck, maybe again.
Yeah, maybe again. There you go. Well, I lived in Enid and Altus both,
okay.
So... but flew the KC-135, and then I switched a few years ago to what's called an RC-26. There's only 11 of them. It's a reconnaissance aircraft, and overseas we're attached to some pretty good customers. Stateside we do counter-drug, counter-narcotics, and basically homeland defense stuff. So it's been a great job. Been to Iraq a number of times, Afghanistan a number of times, all over the world supporting our operations and making sure that Americans are safe. And I tell you what's more important, though, and I know you've seen this in your role too, is just the quality of people that we have that fight for us. I know I always am very careful to say that because I don't ever want it to sound cliche. I don't ever want to say it without fully meaning it. But the quality of people that defend us in our armed forces is just absolutely unbelievable.
It really is. I say that at home. I've had the opportunity in this job, to go to Iraq 8, 9 times, Afghanistan 4 or 5 times, and of course we go for a long weekend or a few days.
Right.
We're not deployed and we're not in dangerous situations, but I wish every American had the opportunity to see young Americans, and some not so young Americans, that have answered the call of their country, and the magnificent job they do, the professionalism. I tell you, it makes you proud. They're every bit as good as their fathers and their grandfathers were, in other conflicts, and you have a lot of faith in this generation.
America is a special breed of people, and I saw a documentary. It's called Restrepo, and it was about
I've seen it.
It's an incredible movie,
really is.
And what gets to me is at the end of that, they've been through a whole bunch of firefights, and they're living in terrible conditions. And I remember a captain said, "Hey, whatever the guy's like, Smith or whatever, why'd you join the Army?" And he just looked at him and goes, "To fight for my country, sir." And it was after everything they've been through, he's still there wanting to fight for his country. I mean, this is a special breed of people. And you know what else is special is how the American people, whether you agree with the war or not, the American people support their troops. And that's very unique compared to everywhere else around the world.
It really is, and frankly, quite a contrast, sadly, to what we saw in the Vietnam era. I really think even some of the strongest critics of our efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan, again, appreciate the service, appreciate the sacrifice, and want to make sure that the men and women we deploy get everything they need to be successful in their mission, come home safely.
Very well said.
Just amazing. Well, tell me on that you also have an extraordinary class that you've entered with. There's an unusually high number of veterans for the post-World War II generation, post-Vietnam era. A lot of men and women in your class have served the country. But tell me a little bit about this extraordinary, it's 87 of you are Republican, it's 90 some odd altogether, but again, one of the bigger classes to come into Congress in a long time.
Yeah, what's amazing to me is I've gotten to know, my fellow freshmen, is the huge number of veterans, as you mentioned. People that come from all kinds of backgrounds of life. They have state legislative experience. There's a lot of people that have no legislative experience. Maybe they own a business. There's a lot of doctors who come in and say, I was upset by what I saw in healthcare reform. One guy was saying he was a stay-at-home dad, staying with his son, and realized, look, this is our time. We have to stand up. What really strikes me about it, and there's a lot of young people too. I'm not the youngest in my class, which surprises a lot of people. But what really gets me is that you see folks and you realize that you see it in their eyes. There's a real passion. And I think we have a great Republican caucus. There's great folks on the other side, but a great Republican caucus. And I think the reintroduction of new blood with new ideas and, frankly, a real fervent focus on saying, you know what, we got to do the right thing, has even taken those that have been here a while and re-energized them if they needed it. And that's a great thing because, now we're in the majority. Now we can talk about the agenda. We still don't own Washington, D.C., and I think that's what people need to realize. We still don't have the presidency. We still don't have the Senate. But we're able to, from our perspective, from one power lever of government, to be able to put forward very responsible ways that we're not continuing that we're not going to leave our children and our grandchildren a country that's worse off.
I think you're exactly right in your description of this class. And I've watched, sadly at my age, I've watched a lot of classes over the years, not just in but outside of Congress as well. And I don't think I've ever seen such fervent commitment to turning the country around. Such a strong sense that you're arriving at a moment of national crisis, really a very historically important moment in American history. The number of people that literally interrupted, prosperous, calm lives to throw themselves into what, particularly when a lot of these guys were getting raises like you. I mean, these were long shot deals. Everybody now looks back in the rearview mirror and says, oh, this was going to be a Republican year and there was going to be a reaction. Believe me, incumbents don't normally get defeated. And your class, yourself included, defeated dozens of incumbents. And these are, able professional politicians with all the advantages that incumbency has. So to take on a task like that, and again, most people that haven't been candidates don't realize the time commitment, the effort,
a lot of work.
The family sacrifice, the personal sacrifice that goes into all this. My gosh, you beg everything you can from your friends. At the end of the process, you wonder if you got any friends left because you've asked them for everything. But again, for dozens of you across the country, and to step up and do this. I just think it's a remarkable testament to your collective patriotism and sense of mission.
And you really hit something on the head. And I'm not saying this to put myself up, but what I see in my colleagues is most of us, myself included, were told, what in the world are you doing? I looked at running starting in February of '09, so the stimulus was basically up. The Republicans held strong. That was that really emboldened a lot of people.
We were supposed to be history.
Yeah.
In February of '09, people were, hey, this is the party of the past. They'll never be back.
And I remember reading something that said permanent minority.
Yeah.
And you know what? But the Republicans held strong and said we can't have wasteful spending, and emboldened a lot of us. But when I made the decision to run, a lot of people said you can't win. There were a lot of folks that are in Congress today that were told you can't win. This is a lesson I try to tell, frankly, anybody, but especially the youth, is if you put your mind to something, you can do it. You know, I mean, there's obviously other things that come into play, but you can do it. Don't let people limit you. Don't let people come in and say, well, you come from this background or you come from this family and you can't make this happen. Don't buy it. You can. You got to work hard. And also part of it with politics is timing. But I'll tell you what, the time was perfect. We had some great candidates out there. And now, you know, we're excited to come out here and do the work of the people.
Well, you had a big week this week. Everybody in this class, and frankly, every existing member of the Republican conference ran on the idea that the health care bill was a bad bill,
right,
and that we were going to repeal it. And of course, a lot of people are saying now, well, it's symbolic. It's the Senate. It's the president will be there. But, you know, you got to deal with what's in front of you.
Right.
And, boy, every single one of you stood up and delivered. And lo and behold, here 10 months after this monstrosity, because that's what it is, was passed, we actually repealed it by a bigger margin in the House of Representatives, the one that's actually closest to the people and most responsive to their will.
Right, and that's what a neat thing is our caucus held together with a handful of Democrats to say this. And when people tell me, isn't this merely symbolic? No, because we are now sending a repeal bill to the United States Senate, and it is up to them whether or not they're going to take it up or not. Now, chances are they probably won't, because that party says, the Democrats say we want this in, at least the leadership does. But that's not symbolic at all. There's a real bill that's going to the Senate to take up. But that said, it's incumbent on us to continue to say, fine, okay, the affordable health care, the Obamacare is in play right now. How can we still make it better? I think, to me, it's egregious that we don't have lawsuit abuse reform, in my view. Cross-state competition for insurance. I mean, there's all these things that we talked about in the campaign that we can still implement to drag the cost, to begin to have pressure to bring the cost of health care down. Because, everybody that said they expected this to be the magic bullet, they still have 15, 20, 25% increases on their health care premium. And this is a big, colossal mess. And we have to work very diligently to make sure that we're really solving these problems.
I think so. Well, let me talk to you about one of the, you were tapped really from the very beginning. I think people saw in our leadership what a leader you were going to be. And you and a few of your freshman colleagues were put on a majority to the transition to the majority committee before you'd ever even been in Congress. You're already, tell us how we can make this place more livable and function better for the American people and be more transparent and understandable. So tell us a little bit about your role in that committee, the subcommittee you were on, and the things you guys did.
Yeah, I got a call the day after the election, basically, to say, hey, we want you to come out to Washington, D.C. Tuesday, and we want you to be on this transition team. And I didn't know what to expect, but what I was very taken aback by in a positive way is that leadership, and this has been like this since we've been here. Leadership hasn't been like, all right, kiddo, you sit on the sideline, you'll learn how it's done here. They have very much been inclusive in the freshman class to say, we want to tap into your ideas and your energy. We see the importance of it. So when I got that call to be on the transition team, I was, in a very positive way, kind of taken aback. Wow, you want a freshman on the team? Well, we showed up. And, Speaker Boehner came in and some leadership and said, look, this is your guys' thing. Now, how do we make sure that we follow through on the pledge we've made to America? And how do we make this place not only run more efficiently, more inexpensively, but how can we be more responsive and open? And that's what we worked on. The area where I specialized in was in the schedule. And I think what we saw out of that, and both sides agree, is we're doing the same amount of work. We're in D.C. the same days, but we're able to get home and really touch base with the district and have time in the district to hear what people are saying. So we're going to come out for a few weeks, work hard, go back, reconnect, and folks are going to say, I like it, I don't like it, or whatever. That's the key. We're representatives here. So that job is very job descriptive in the word. We were supposed to represent people. Well, it seems like under the 111th Congress, the previous Congress, the goal was to keep people from going home and from listening to the people. Well, that's something that we haven't changed. And we also, then cut our own budget in Congress 5%. Is that going to solve the national debt? No, but it's living by example. We're going to ask people to make sacrifices. We have to be willing to make it ourselves. So I really had an enjoyable time on there, and I think a lot of our changes that came from the transition team are really going to, I think folks are going to say, you know what, I think that they really mean what they say.
I think so. And you even changed the nature of our day, not just the amount of time here, but this idea of making sure floor votes occur in the afternoon so committees can really focus down and do their work. I mean, I was formerly on the Armed Services Committee before I was on Appropriations, and it used to embarrass and frustrate me no end that we would have the Joint Chiefs of Staff in to testify on the defense budget or the state of the war, and that we'd be 20 minutes into their opening statements, testimony, a bell would go off. We were all supposed to go to the floor. It would take an hour, and here we have the most important leaders in the United States military cooling their heels, waiting for us to come back, which they always did respectfully. I mean, but the reality is, it's just the time management was ridiculous.
Right.
And sometimes we'd be voting on silly things when every committee in Congress, but particularly that one and that subject, should have been focusing on something else.
Yeah, absolutely. People expect us to work when we're here and work hard, and that's the great thing on my committee on yours of probes or energy and commerce. We've got some tough work to do this year. Let's do it, and let's make sure that people are there and are going to be there for these meetings so we can have productive input, and then we can vote in the evening. And the other good thing is there's not going to be any more votes on congratulating this team or congratulating.
I think we ran out of post offices to rename. Now I got to tell you, representing the University of Oklahoma, I'm a little chagrined that when we win the national title next year, I won't be able to run. But I think the people in Oklahoma they won't care, and they'll know.
Illinois might have something to
That's
say
right.
about that.
Well, I don't think so, partner.
Probably true.
Maybe somebody, but I don't think Illinois next year.
That's right.
But let me ask you, because you also ended up with a terrific committee assignment.
Yeah.
Energy and commerce. And before I get to the committee and what you're doing there, it really reflects the nature of your district in many ways. I like, obviously, Illinois is a long way from Oklahoma, but your district's involvement in energy-related issues, which are critical to us in our state, is really extensive and about as broad as anywhere in the country. So why don't you give our listeners and viewers a little idea of just the range of energy interests in your district, and then some of your thoughts maybe about the sorts of things we ought to be doing as a country, where energy policy is concerned.
Well, let me say that the day I drove into Oklahoma, I was moving into Enid, Oklahoma, and I drove in and I basically crossed right into the border, and I looked around, I called my dad on the phone, and I go, it reminds me a lot like home, just a little bit warmer. But the landscape of Oklahoma, besides the dirt's a little bit different color, and the landscape of Illinois, it's very much the same kind of people, good folks, and my district has 3 nuclear power plants in it. I think nuclear power is going to play a huge role in our energy security. And I don't even like to use the term energy independence anymore as much as I like to use energy security, because to me we're talking about almost a national defense issue here. Every generation, every country, so every 10 years or 15 years, there's always some explosion somewhere that a nation can really grab hold of and in essence ride the Bronco or whatever. It was cars in the 90s, consumer electronics now, the iPod, stuff like that. Energy is an area where I think I'd love to think that in 50 years, America can be a net exporter of energy. I mean, we have a huge, wealthy land, and we're frankly, 308 million people, we're not overpopulated. We should be able to be an exporter of energy. So my district has ethanol, my district has nuclear, my district has wind, we have hydro energy. We play a very big role when it comes to energy independence and energy security. So I think that's very important in my district. What do we do in the long run, though? We've got to get away from saying this group over here is bad, this group isn't. We can only go for alternative energy sources and not fossil fuel. We have to have an all-of-the-above approach. And we've got to get away. I don't know how to do this. We've got to get away from seeing things in terms of next election, and we've got to see it in terms of generations down the road. We've got to have a 30-year. We've got to have a 40-year plan where we say, you know what, I may not be in Congress that long, but I know that my job is to get us to that point in 40 years. If we have kids, I don't have kids yet, but when I do, if my kids become my age and we are just as dependent on foreign oil and foreign energy as we are today, then shame on all of us, frankly. We've got to have a long-term plan on this, and it's going to include nuclear. It's going to include drilling. It's going to include alternative energy sources. I'm a fan of alternative energy, but our population continues to grow, and alternative energy in some cases is not even able to make up that increase, much less what we're already using in foreign oil.
No question. But this is actually an area that we may be able to have some bipartisan cooperation, and a lot of this will depend on what the president does. There were actually a couple of hopeful signs. I mean, on nuclear, he has actually stepped forward and over $8 billion in loan guarantees, and if we can just lower that, speed up that permitting process and rebuild that, he's been a pretty good advocate of natural gas, beginning to think about that, and we know we have abundant natural gas resources in this country. We actually could be self-sufficient, and
absolutely,
conversion of that would be great. So hopefully, we can find, even, this wouldn't extend to the president, but remember back when we were in the majority before, we could always move things through the House of Representatives on ANWR, the opening up of Alaska. And one of the reasons we could, the Teamsters, not a reliable Republican voting bloc, to say the least. But look, they understood the thousands of really good jobs that were associated with this, and the importance of the country being independent in terms of its energy consumption supply. So,
yeah, and energy jobs are good, high-paying, consistent jobs. And Oklahoma and Illinois have a lot in common. And I think our whole area, the Great Plains area, can be a leading producer of energy for our country and the world.
Well, you also are on a committee that's going to have a lot to do with health care. As you said, we've made our opening move and repealed Obamacare through the House, and I think it'll be interesting to see in the Senate, because I think Senator McConnell is going to work hard to give the Senate an opportunity to address the issue head up. So that'll be there for a couple of years. But I'm sort of proud that we're not stopping there. And there's 4 major committees here that are starting to pick up, okay, what would be the alternatives? What would be the things that we ought to do in place? And you're in an absolutely key committee in that, on energy and commerce. So what's the schedule unfolding on energy and commerce in terms of addressing healthcare? What are you looking at doing?
Well, I think today we sent the instruction to the committees to begin to address the issue. So I think you're going to see in our committee basically hearings begin on it. All proposals brought up immediately. I signed on to the bill which would allow cross-state competition for insurance.
Me too.
Good, and I think that's going to be a very good bill. And I think that's an area. These are all areas too where I think we can find bipartisan support. Some, because when they passed Obamacare, people said, oh, well, it's got this provision in here, or it gives a few dollars for seed money to look at lawsuit abuse reform. Well, if you're saying that's a great thing, why don't we just implement it and see what happens here? So we're going to begin to have hearings on that. The subcommittee will, and we'll take it up as a full committee, and I think really make some positive steps in this. And people are going to be glad by what they see. They're going to be proud of it. On a bigger scale, though, we've got some real budget issues we're going to have to tackle too. So it's going to be I'll tell you what, it's going to be a very interesting few months and years.
What on the budget front, again, that's probably, I think, the way in the short term Republicans will be measured, because you can quantify it. Are you beginning to spend less money? Where are the areas you think we ought to be looking? What are the things you think we ought to be doing?
I think we have to look all across the board. I think even, in my case, and you need to hear the follow-up when I say this, I think you have to even look at the defense budget. Not in saying we're cutting programs or people or anything like that. That's the problem. People go into, we're going to cut people or we're going to cut programs. But I can tell you, as a DoD employee, as a military pilot, I've seen areas of waste. It happens with any big part of government. We need to go through, find that area of waste, find where waste exists, and put that into part of the increase that we probably need to continue to fund the military. The unspent portion of the stimulus, here's a big one. The unspent portion of the stimulus should be canceled. Most economists are saying the stimulus didn't do anything. let's just cancel it. Okay, that money can be back with the American people. You look at returning to 2008 budget levels. That's going to be an immediate almost $100 billion savings. These are all areas we can be in. But the key to tell people, and the thing I need people to understand when we talk out there is, it's going to hurt. Everybody's going to feel this. This isn't going to be focused on one group or another. We're all going to sacrifice. We're going to have to cut. But ultimately, we're not going to solve this by cutting our way out of the deficit. We've got to grow the economy. And right now, you have organizations like, in some cases, the EPA, and overreaching and overregulating and hampering a lot of private market job creation. And you have entrepreneurs, frankly, that are scared to death to invest in America. And that's a scary thing. If we can restore that realization that this is a great place to invest in, and the understanding that, you know what, government doesn't create jobs. We don't. But we can create a friendly environment for the free market to flourish. And when we can get back to that, I think you're going to see people want to invest here. People love, we make great products. When the economy recovers and the economy grows, you're going to see that budget deficit shrink too.
Yeah, I think growth is the key. There, actually, as you say, you can't cut your way out of this. Our good mutual friend and conference chairman, Jeb Henschling, has a great line on this, which he said probably in the 112th Congress, the Congress in which you and I serve, the Appropriations Committee will be the most important committee. If we do our job right in the 113th, Ways and Means, which means basically tax policy and entitlements, will become the most important committee. And we'll find out whether or not the president's serious in terms of, I mean, we're getting a lot of happy talk about, yeah, we think we need to cut the budget. We now have a born-again regulatory reformer in the White House, which is great.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I do, I got to tell you, they're pretty astute down there about reading the political tea leaves.
Yes,
anyway,
that's right.
We better change our rhetoric here. But let's give the president the benefit of the doubt and Phil meet us halfway. I think you'd sit down and see some very serious negotiations. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get there without some kind of entitlement reform, some sort of tax reform, we're coming close. We got a little bit of time, but I'd like any thoughts you have on that. And plus, the President of the United States is going to be speaking to us literally next week, State of the Union message. What would you like to hear him say, and what do you think you're going to hear him say?
Well, first off, to go to your previous subject, I think we are going to have to really address the issue long-term of entitlements. We can understand those nearing retirement now can stay under the same system, but I'm talking my generation, my age and younger. What are some of the things we need to do to ensure that we're not making false promises to people that stuff's going to be there? From the president, I want to hear a conciliatory tone and understanding that the American people spoke in November, that they sent a message that we've got to cut spending, we've got to get people back to work. Again, he says now, oh, you know what, we've been over-regulating. Great, let's see some action in pulling some of that over-regulation back and allowing Americans just to be Americans. Let us blaze our own trail. It's kind of that old West feeling of, you know what, I'm going to live my life, I'm going to do what I do, and the government stay out of my way. I'd like to see that kind of happen. And again, be willing to work with us. I'll be willing to work with Democrats on great ideas. We need to be willing to. Our country only has, we can't just sit back and play partisan politics only for 2 years. We need to try to govern. But we cannot forget what we were sent here to do, and we've got to follow through.
Well, I tell you what, I think anybody that had the good fortune to listen to you and to watch you will be very optimistic about where the country is going to go. You and your class were exactly not just what the Republican Party needed, but more importantly what the country needed to hear, and just renews my faith and my belief in the future of the country. So thanks for your service, thanks for what you're doing here, and thanks for coming and being on the show.
You bet, it was great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.